Good morning. I'm going to start chapter 12 in this video, and I'm going to talk about some of the similarities and differences that exist in the words micro and macroevolution. Excuse me. Microevolution is the variation that we see at the population level due to different combinations of alleles that exist in individuals that live in these populations. And it's due to things such as gene flow, mutation, genetic drift, and natural selection. So species have the ability that their genetics, if you will, their gene or allele frequencies change from generation to generation. Doesn't really say that speciation is going to occur, but it says that populations are variable. The illustration down below might be used for genetic drift. Say if the change in the green gene goes from 80 to 60%, but it's hard to explain why that change occurred. That would be, or could be used as an example of genetic drift. In this slide, we're going to specifically mention mutation and natural selection as two of the factors that are involved in microevolution. Mutation can occur at the gene or the chromosome level. So let's say that the example shows a mutated gene or allele that instead of forming a green pigment in the body, forms brown. So mutation can lead to variation, as in chapter 8. So genetic variation in a population is often determined by mutations that occur at either the gene or chromosome level. Natural selection can then either favor or select against a mutation. In the example below, it shows that the brown mutated allele, if you will, forms a variable population, and in a brown environment, that mutation is actually favored via its camouflage. And the green variation is selected against because it's just not the right environment for it to be protected from the predator. So, mutation can lead to genetic variation. Natural selection can either favor or select against different mutations and those allele combinations, just depending upon the environment the organism lives and the different biotic factors and abiotic factors that are selecting in that environment. This slide mentions gene flow and genetic drift and their importance in the process of microevolution. Gene flow involves immigration and immigration, immigration with an E and immigration with an I. The movement of individuals in and out of a population along with their genes or alleles. That can change the frequency of alleles in a population by individuals moving in or out of that population. Genetic drift, again, like the second slide, is when the frequency of an allele changes, but the explanation for that change is hard to determine. So why does the brown allele change from 25 to 29% from the first to second generations in the beetles below? If it can't be explained all that easily, it's referred to as genetic drift. So genetic drift is just random changes in allele frequencies that are hard to explain. Okay, so that's kind of a outline, if you will, of microevolution, the variation in populations at a small scale, and what accounts for some of the variation that we see in populations. Macroevolution is grand scale evolution. When we look at the history of life on Earth, it primarily involves the evolution of orders of organisms, phyla, maybe even kingdoms or domains, assuming that there's a common ancestor for all these different life forms. We typically look at patterns in the fossil record, and what we really see is not gradual change at all, as Darwin proposed. We actually see stability. Populations, groups don't change all that much. We see extinction events being very important, where large numbers of organisms go extinct within a fairly small geologic time period. And then we see, after this extinction event, we see fairly rapid speciation of new groups. So macroevolution adds time into the equation. The same processes of mutation, gene flow, genetic drift, and natural selection are important, along with the time in which life has been present on Earth to evolve or change. Again, the main patterns that are observed when the fossil record is examined are what is called stasis or stability. Groups don't change very much. Extinction, some groups, some species go extinct at a fairly rapid pace due to some catastrophic environmental event. And then groups of new organisms tend to arise. Large-scale speciation events often follow extinctions. So those tend to be the primary patterns that are observed in the fossil record when the Earth's history is examined. This really doesn't have as much support due to the incompleteness of the fossil record and trying to go back 3.5 to maybe 4 billion years. It's a very incomplete puzzle, if you will. Trying to put say a million pieces of puzzle together, and maybe you only have 100. So there's a lot of gaps that do exist in the explanation of macroevolution. Two models that have tried to explain macroevolution that I'll end this video with are punctuated equilibrium and quantum evolution. They're fairly similar. A punctuated equilibrium was proposed in the early 1970s by Niles Eldredge and Stephen Jay Gould. Their concept of macroevolution tried to fit the fossil record and the patterns that were observed in the fossil record, that most groups of organisms existed on Earth fairly unchanged in what is referred to as stasis or stability. That from a standpoint of evolution, they didn't change very much. At least that's what's thought. Then an extinction event occurred, fairly large scale extinction event, and then this led to a rapid period of new species forming. They called this cladogenesis. In response to this large-scale extinction, some sort of catastrophic change in the environment, like from a massive volcanic eruption, or from global warming, or even more important than global warming is global cooling, as we'll see in chapter 13. So stasis or stability of organisms, followed by their extinction, and then followed by rapid speciation. Their mechanism of speciation that they thought was most important was allopatric speciation, and that is a type of speciation that is due to geographic isolation. Niles Eldredge and Stephen Jay Gould favored the isolation of a small number of individuals and then the rapid speciation of new species, if you will, in new habitats, the development of new niches, and the Darwin's finches, or the Galapagos Islands finches, are kind of used in that regard. That from an initial colonist of a few individuals from Central or South America, the ground seed-eating finch-like bird, that the isolation of the Galapagos Islands along with the new environments and habitats resulted in a fairly rapid speciation of new forms as they colonized these and reproduced in these different environments and habitats. Okay. Quantum evolution was proposed by George Gaylord Simpson in 1944. It was in large part due to trying to explain the Cambrian evolution, when in the fossil record most of the animal phyla and groups appeared within a very small geologic window. So Simpson proposed that different groups of, or phyla of marine animals rapidly emerged, and that different groups of these animals had different rates of evolution. He termed them slow, medium, and rapid tempos of evolution. His quantum was that when new forms appeared, transitional forms were perhaps very unstable, and they did not fossilize. So he tried to explain why transitional fossils have been hard to come by in the fossil record. He utilized adaptive radiation as being a very important mechanism in quantum evolution, that you had very fast speciation events and due to divergent evolution occurring by organisms or populations inhabiting different habitats, different environments, and taking on different niches in those environments. So there's a lot of similarity, and Stephen Jay Gould used some of the ideas of Simpson when he and Eldredge were formulating the concept of punctuated equilibrium about 30 years later. So micro and macroevolution. Micro is the changes that occur within a population, the variation that exists within a population due to things such as mutation, and then how that variation might change due to genetic drift, gene flow, and even natural selection. Macroevolution is those four factors with time, the time in which life has existed on Earth added in. It's the evolution of the different groups of organisms on Earth, the family tree, if you will, of life on Earth, assuming that all life on Earth began with a common ancestor. Microevolution is much better supported with data than is macroevolution. So I just thought I would try to explain those terms. You might hear them from time to time. And there's different levels of studying life on Earth. And with the next video, we're going to turn to some different types of selection other than natural selection, if you will, and talk about some mating systems and how one mate chooses another or selects another for mating, which I think is very interesting. It's very interesting. It kind of leads into Dr. Clooney's animal behavior class. So y'all take care, and I'll talk to you again soon. God bless y'all. Bye.